Welcome to the first of our podcast, guys. These will be aired on Spotify. We will upload them there as well, but they'll also be available on our other platforms, won't they, Shell?
Yes, yep, they'll be on subscribers, on all our socials, and they'll be on YouTube for you.
I think we're going to cover some fairly controversial sort of topics, but we're going to make, I guess everyone's a little bit about real life now, aren't they? And we've noticed that our last couple of videos we've probably done has been a bit more reality.
Yeah, we've had a lot of people say to us, we want to see the nitty gritty, we want to really hear your thoughts. And I think in the equestrian community, more than anywhere else, we're all expected to be perfect. We're not supposed to have feelings, you know, and I've found myself becoming more and more a created, sort of, like a curated version of ourselves for the shiny Instagram.
By social media, you mean?
Yeah, because when you go out to shows, you're constantly being judged by the judges and everybody else. And so you keep everything completely positive. And gradually, I've discussed it with Greg and my close friends, have felt like me is becoming less and less me and just a shiny version that rides Grand Prix horses. And that isn't fair to who I am, and it's not fair to other people who are actually thinking, well, where's the rest?
That is true, because actually I had a friend who I was doing a lot of teaching with and got to know quite well over a number of years, and he was coming down to visit in Sydney, and he said, oh, you know, looks like things are going well for you guys on Facebook, everything looks great, you know, you're moving ahead. And I said, yep, social media is a great reflection of probably how your life isn't really, is it?
Well, you know, nobody wants to see you getting on there all the time saying, oh, you know, the expenses and I don't feel this and I don't, you know. So originally we kept everything positive just to keep it upbeat, but I think there's a lot going on for every equestrian and especially dressage riders in the world now, and a lot of us are feeling not scared but concerned about the consistent trolling. So we decided that we would have a voice and that we're going to share it with you. And today we're going to talk about a subject that I personally, it really concerned me, was whether or not dressage or equestrian should be part of the Olympics anymore. So Greg, are you a yes or a no man?
Look, I am still a yes. I was brought up, I guess, in the era where the Olympics was all about amateurs and you didn't have professional sports people, and that's right across the board, guys, not just equestrians. But I was brought up a little bit, I guess, thinking, well, all those people out there weren't actually making a dollar out of being at the Olympics. You actually were a backyard hero, you might say.
Well, that still applies to us because we're still not making any money out of horses.
It is. But I guess nowadays in basketball, there's a lot of professional basketballers out there, soccer players, a lot of professional soccer players. And I guess what we're seeing now a little bit...
Well, I don't know specifically which sports it applies to, but I know that a lot of sports can now have professionals in it.
Apparently back in about 1988, this all changed. The IOC started to allow these professional athletes in, which is probably... I guess we're starting to see a bit of a turnaround in all disciplines where people were starting to become earning money from different sports. You're different, and so your athletes, equestrian and all included, were probably becoming a bit more professional side. It was your living to do it.
That's right.
And I guess we're seeing now probably more and more our top equestrian athletes are professionals. Is that correct? Would you say that?
I would think so. I mean, you know, it's an expensive sport to stay in. So I think let's talk about why people are saying that it shouldn't be an Olympic sport anymore.
Oh, that's a touchy one, isn't it? Are you referring to like the abuse thing? Or?
Well, that's one big part of it, is are horses being treated ethically? And how is it an even playing field when it is essentially a sport for the wealthy?
Well, there's two different subjects there. So I guess let's talk about horse ethics a little bit to start with. And I know
so you're going to dive straight
I'm going to dive straight in there, guys. But look, I guess because we're seeing a lot of against equestrian sports at the moment with a couple of different social media platforms, which
specifically dressage. I mean, we said we were going to open this podcast so that people could really hear how it is.
Yeah.
So it is specific to dressage.
It is specific to dressage at the moment.
Although how it can be when you look across racing and harness racing. I'm sorry for those of you who have racehorse and harness horses, but you would have copped it too. And you know, and when you see the horses coming into jumps at events and their mouths are wide open, and I mean, unfortunately, whenever you're looking at any sport, when you look at tennis players, if you slow down the torque that they're getting on their elbows and their knees, and sport is tough.
But it's interesting because I guess when you look at that, I mean, I got a little bit more involved with the whole tack thing a couple of years ago, and I keep an eye on the different tack and different sports. Dressage is actually the most hit upon with what you're not allowed to use. So
I know, but we are so heavily policed, more so than any of the
yet,
sports.
As I said to you the other week, I find it quite funny, guys, because we're not allowed to use this, we're not allowed to use that, all these things you're not allowed to use. But by laws, is it still you have to use spurs at a certain level at dressage?
Oh yeah. So Greg and I are going to get a bit at loggerheads about stuff too, because Greg is a cowboy and I'm a new age dressage diva. So Greg and I are going to have some differing opinions. So yes, Greg, there is still a rule that you have to wear spurs. I believe from advanced, but I'll have to check if it's medium or advanced. Why do you have to wear spurs? Well, I guess that. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that rule, but to date, my experience is that between medium and advanced, all my horses have had spurs on at that level. Mm-hmm. Most of them, by the time they get to Grand Prix, don't need spurs anymore. So why it's a rule, I don't know.
It's a weird rule.
It is a weird rule, but getting back to the basics, our governing bodies are incredibly strict with how we wear. Like if you look at the rules, the EA rules, just the Australian rules of what length our whips are supposed to be, what length our spurs are supposed to be, how tight, thick our nose bands are, and then you watch a polo match and they have, tie downs everywhere, and and there's nothing.
Tie me up, to dig up, to dig downs.
Yeah, and I love watching polo. There's a lot to love about that too. So I'm not criticising as long as the horses live great lives, but it's hard as a dressage rider to get so heavily trolled when our governing bodies look after the horse's welfare better than any other sport.
Well, here's some controversy for you on that one. So
any other horse sport.
The new nose band regulation, which we've all seen come in at the moment, and they've got it now, I think most Australians call them the door stoppers, which is the measuring tool. Mm-hmm. So I made one up actually at home when they first talked about it, just to test the loud nose bands, and she was well and truly within legal limits. It was interesting though, because internationally FEI have said, well, we're going to be testing at all competitions the new nose band regulation. Yeah. Australia seems to have adopted a policy where they're saying, well, it'll only be at FEI competitions, and you may be tested on the way to warm-up, in the warm-up, out of the warm-up,
and you may not be tested at all.
After you test, but it still may not. The regulation states, FEI, that was all going to be tested. You still may not have to be subjected to a noseband tightness test.
At all.
But,
to be fair, again, Greg, so I'm always fair, and Greg is just, he just calls it like it is. It was the first CDI we've had since the rule came in.
Australia, we've had 12 months of warning.
Yeah, but it is the first show since it actually came in. Australia our show organisers get very little support from their governing body. So, it's all our shows are basically run with volunteers. I think some of the stewards are paid.
Not sure, I think, yeah.
Oh, maybe their flights are paid, but they're not paid very much. They're all doing it for the love of the sport.
Kathy, Trev, you can answer that one for us.
Well, they probably didn't have enough people to police it across the board, or they may be deeper. I was at the meeting, but all the dogs were all growling and barking, and then they all started playing. So I only heard you may be tested, you may not be tested. And then when we went up, the fellow testing, who's been a really lovely steward for a long time, was so nervous he dropped it. He said to me, "Oh my God, please don't film." Put it through the horse's noseband. My horse just stood there asleep, and then he dropped it again. And he was so nervous because the outcry has been unbelievable, hasn't it, against the nosebands?
Well, interesting enough.
Understandably, but we can get into that.
I've only been in dressage now 25 years, I think. Mm. And I was introduced to nosebands by different trainers with the old, they used to call them the German crank, they used to refer to those.
Most nosebands still have a crank on them.
Which I thought was the strongest pulleying system. I mean, I came from stock horses and race horses, and so that crank, I thought, wow, this guy, someone's really worked out how to get a noseband up tight.
I do think the crank should be removed, because one of my horses chewed her noseband the other day and I put a new noseband on, another crank. her old one was a normal noseband, the new one was
Tube her noseband.
Yeah, well, we've been going in and out of the flow, and you haven't been
How's
working.
the horse chew a noseband?
Anyway, so I went to put it on, and with the crank, I just went, and it felt so easy. And then I checked it, and because there were no holes on it, yet no worn holes, and I'd done it up extremely tightly, which she doesn't need a tight noseband. So I undid it, and I really struggled to feel. Whereas when you've got a noseband in each hand, it's what would be the way you would describe it? There's no
pulley system.
It's not cohesive, so it's a little bit harder to put it in. So it actually took me about 5 minutes of adjusting and putting my fingers all around to see where her noseband normally sat, because the crank naturally wanted to sit tighter than I wanted it.
But the crank was still no excuse for having tight nosebands either. And
No,
I couldn't
so
understand.
why
I
does
was
somebody
questioned.
have a tight noseband?
I was questioned by a trainer years ago at a large stud farm I was
The
at.
dressage trainer?
It was a dressage trainer, and I was watching the horse. I was working with young horses up in the barns, and I watched the horse being worked on the arena, and the horse was actually having trouble breathing. And to me, a horse has got to have air coming in and out of its airways.
Yes.
I quietly watched for about 10 minutes, and then I got called out, and they said, could you come over to this horse and see if you could help and tell me what's going on? And I walked down and said, listen, would you let me just let the noseband out a couple of holes?
Those can't breathe.
Horse can't breathe, and they looked at me like weirdly. And I said, if I let it out a couple of holes, I think we'll probably find a little bit of a more relaxed. And I let it out 2 holes, which was still quite firm, and the horse went. Now that was a classical crank noseband system on that horse, and it was a young horse.
And the 2 fingers rule was already in place, so that noseband should never have been like that in the first
Nobody
place.
would quite work out where to put the 2.
You'd never get 2 in there.
2 down that way, 2 down that way, 2 down the side, 2 down the front. People were trying to stick it 2 sideways down the front.
Yeah, is it sideways?
So the tool, look, the doorstop rule I think is great for nosebands. I think at least we've now got a measuring tool that we can get and
look,
EA
there's going to have
available.
to be discretion. If there's a young horse or a horse off the track that's plainly panicking and isn't going to let you come to the front of their face, I mean, most horses by the time they get to a competition aren't going to have any problem with you coming towards the front of their face, but you know, there's no perfect horses and there's no perfect people either, or systems. So I guess you're just going to have discretion. You know, if you can see the noseband cutting into their face, then the stewards are just going to have to roll with that. But I think what you just said is probably no good for dressage, because I know that is something that happens in dressage. And I also know the horse you were referring to, you came home to me and said it was so stressed it was actually urinating while it was working.
That was a different one.
A different one, same trainer. And Greg was in tears when he told me, and he said, and you know, I've never seen your horses like that. And that isn't dressage. Dressage, you know, by definition is a basis of training the horse so that it is harmonious and beautiful. So when you're finding that you're forcing noses shut and your spurs are getting bigger and you're using the whip more often, something is wrong. Something in your training has basically gone wrong. So we said we were going to be really honest here. I'm going to be really honest. I have started training Blue to Grand Prix now, my favourite horse. They're all my favourites. He's got something in him. We always knew it would happen. He's 17.3. And I've just kept him just very, very nice. I've never put power through his frame because he was too big. He felt like he was on stilts with a strong wind blowing. He's always done very well, but we've always kept him just steady, haven't we?
Yep.
And suddenly something frightened him and he found a new gear. And I said to Greg, oh, there's a new gear here. But there was too much power, there's too much tightness. My friend was watching me ride. She said, his mouth's open. Do you want me to tighten up the noseband? I said, no, his noseband's always been like this. He's always worn a loose noseband because he's a very athletically well-conformed horse.
As a trainer, what would closing up the noseband normally have said? So,
right, okay.
So if someone says, oh, your noseband needs tightening, what was that going to do to the horse? What supposedly tightening the noseband?
Me, it would crush the nerves in his face.
No, but as a trainer...
Oh, so the person who says, close it up. So it makes it look prettier. So you can keep all the power, but you don't have the horse.
It's a look thing.
Yes, it is, but it's also, if your horse's mouth is too wide open, so Jockey Boy, for instance, he's not athletically well conformed, his TMJ joint sits like that, and one side of his mouth is that wide, one side of his mouth isn't even as wide as a pinky finger. Like they had to design a special file to go down the side of his mouth because they couldn't get his teeth down that side. So the vets designed a bridle and a noseband system for him, especially for when he was young. His noseband is not loose now, but it's certainly loose enough to fit the tools down. If we left his noseband completely loose and not like the other horses, he would open his mouth, get his tongue over the bit. He wouldn't be dangerous because he's a nice guy, but a tongue over the bit is dangerous. We have another one, if we leave the noseband completely loose and flappy, he shakes his head, there's no stability, even the throat lash doesn't hold it on, his bridle goes flying off. And he's 18 hands, so his noseband is adjusted so that it just sits a little bit snugly around his nose. I'll show you a picture, it still sits like that far off.
So in history though, why was the noseband invented? Why did we use it?
Well, for those reasons. So some horses will come against the bridle, open their mouth, put their tongue out.
Okay.
So it's a training aid for one, like a bit, like a stirrup, like a saddle.
Yep.
Like it's just helpful to stabilise for Jack. It stabilises his actual TMJ joint because his TMJ joint does this the whole time. Even in the wash bay, you've heard him grounding his teeth and he's uncomfortable. He even likes his halter sitting a little bit snugger around. He'd probably be one of those people that always wears earphones as well.
So that was a bit of dressage gear for dummies. I just wanted to make sure, because sometimes when we talk about this stuff, people don't understand why some of this gear's been. It's like I said to you ages ago, I was doing Florian's new double and I couldn't get the lip strap through. I said, well, what do you want it for? Like, what's it do? It doesn't do anything. But it was a stabilising tool, isn't it, for the chain stuff?
That's right. So back to Blue, yes, I had an option just to close his nose in. But the better option was to stop and go, why is his mouth open? His mouth is never open. Because I have a shit ton of power coming through the body.
A shit ton of power.
A lot of power coming through the body. He's not strong enough. His top line muscles weren't strong enough to hold it. So his back became tight. And he said to me, I'm not coping. Same as that, the face that we make when we're lifting heavy weights and stuff. So I made a choice that I would make a heap of half holds and try to just hold him in that up frame for a circle. And then the next day I held him in that frame for a circle on one step. And I made a lot more half holds. So
did he close his mouth?
The next day? He did, but he opened it still more than he normally did. So the next day we put him in a halter and rode him over poles because I felt like he needed a little break and I needed a little break.
So instead of getting off and tightening your noseband, strapping his nose shut and saying, don't open your mouth, we're working, you went, how do I change my training to help you with this power that you've... Because, and Florian, we've had him since he was a baby, and we've always with him come across these things. All of a sudden he just has this brand new... And when I was long reining him, all of a sudden the horse starts...
Yes, Greg called me down when he was just turning 3 and he said, I think this one won't be for sale.
So the automatic thing for another trainer would be get off, tighten the noseband, whereas your new age style of training... No, not new age, but not all, but your new age style of, and where we're thinking more nowadays about training dressage horses, you went, okay, hang on a second, what went on? Let's just stop for a second and think about it. You went, okay, too much power, he didn't know how to cope with it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go home and think about how to help you cope with that new gear.
No, because it always comes down to you as a rider assessing it, and it's always our fault because the horses don't dream of being dressage horses. They just dream of their feed and their cuddles and spending time with their friends. So the onus is always back on us. That if the horse is uncomfortable, what do we do to make them uncomfortable? How can we make them more comfortable? And I guess this just comes back to treating the horses ethically. I would say that 99.9% of sport horses across the board, polo, dressage, shirting, whatever, are treated better than our dogs, and our dogs are treated fairly well.
Oh, look, I think you see it not quite a lot, but you see it occasionally on social media, some of these top trainers that lose a horse or their horse is injured, and they're in tears.
Oh, I love my horses. Sometimes even when we go on holidays, I say, "Oh, wouldn't our horses enjoy this?" And Greg doesn't.
Holiday
agree.
choices for the King Andrews family is how many dogs can we take, and is there possibility of taking Jack or maybe a couple other horses with us?
Absolutely. So let's get down to tin tags. If you know that the horses are all treated as well as human beings, it comes down to the fact that do horses have a choice to be dressage horses? And they don't. So is it ethically okay then to say, because a horse is a noble, willing creature and it's a wild animal, to say, this is what we want you to do? And that's, it doesn't, like all the trolls and everything have come across that it's not ethical because you put an apparatus. When did a bridle become an apparatus? But anyway.
Well, it is an apparatus.
Well, yeah, but they say it with evil intent, the apparatus on its head. So for me, these people that are riding their horses bareback and in what do they call those bitless bridles, that they take 3 seconds to release a bit, up to 3 seconds to release a bitless
some
bridle.
are pretty wild, yeah.
I can release instantly, but I'm not criticising bitless bridles either. But if I take Apple and turn her into a dressage dog, is that cruel?
Well, it is, because she wasn't bred to be a dressage dog. And that was going to be my next
Who
point.
says?
We talk about does this horse want to be a dressage horse? And I guess now we look at that for the last however many hundreds of years we've been breeding dressage horses, and in Australia we've been breeding them really well now for probably 20 years. I would say that the good ones have really started to appear.
Oh, at least 50.
Yeah, but we saw a fairly average line of Australian dressage horses.
Well, it says here,
when
I've
I
been
came
riding
into
for
it.
quite a while.
Eh?
I don't know, I don't think my horses were that average.
Yeah, but if you look at how breeders in Australia have now fine-tuned out, so you look at Heath and Rossie's programming, for example, which I
There's some good
always
horses
follow.
in Australia.
We've gotten better and better and better.
So you're saying
same
if you
with-
bred it, so it's not a wild horse, if you bred it, then it doesn't have the right to go and run across the field.
No, of course it does. Of course it does. But you've also breeding a horse that it's naturally. So I always refer back to working dogs. So there's a lot of working dogs.
Oh,
young
incredible, aren't they?
And working dogs are bred to be working dogs. So a young kelpie, you'll see the breeders take them out and they work a young group of kelpies.
Without even watching their mum, they start going
it's just
in
naturally there. Now, if I
yeah,
watch
it's
a young
incredible.
dressage horse and we assess them in the paddocks when we look at them at foals or we give them to 2-year-olds, and the horse goes across the paddock, now that young dressage horse that's bred to be a dressage horse is going to naturally have better action. And whereas if I'm watching a young racehorse go across the paddock, really well bred racehorse, its naturally action is going to be quite different because it's bred to be longer.
That's an interesting subject about
that's-
the different breeds and how they respond to the different sports.
Yeah, so
aren't
even
they?
though those different breeds can do dressage or showdown, whatever it might be, horses for courses a little bit, guys, is that dressage horses, top dressage horses are bred to do dressage because we're trying to refine everything. So ethically, is it wrong to ask that horse to do dressage? Well, in a lot of eyes, depending on the pressure being put on them. So if it's an unethical trainer, which I think we've got to look at, it's not so much across the board. When I see, and all of my friends and associates here in Australia or overseas, who I watch as dressage trainers, and yes, there are people that I think, I wouldn't let you have a horse, I wouldn't let you train my donkey.
But what about if you are an ethical dressage trainer? Is it ethical to take an innocent animal and turn them into a sport horse?
If the horse has the capabilities of doing it, but then the smart trainer gets a horse and goes, this horse will be a prelim novice horse, this horse will be a medium advanced horse, this horse will be a Grand Prix horse. So even if it's really well bred, if it's not conformationally correct and then mentally correct, it still may not be a Grand Prix horse. So it's up to the trainers and owners to then decide whether that horse is ever going to make it that level, or we say, and we've done it here in the past.
That is a good point. Still doesn't answer the question though. It is a good point. If you have a horse that is moderately talented, and talent isn't just in their physical abilities, mentally as well. Chile was one of the most physically talented horses I've ever ridden, but emotionally and mentally he was.
Couldn't go.
Yeah, he really couldn't. And you learn with each horse. So if you have one of those, let it opt out at prelim. Let it go to somebody who just wants to do, a rider club or a trail rider.
But that's where the ethics come in. So we talk about ethics in training horses. Yeah. The ethics come in when the trainer that's trying to train a Golden Slipper winner says this horse will never make it. I'm not going to push him to be a Golden Slipper runner. I'll just let him go out and do a country track. The dressage trainer says, I've started this young horse under saddle. I thought he was going to be a Grand Prix horse, but he's struggling getting through his lower levels. I think I'll sell him off.
His hocks are straight or mentally.
Yeah.
Like, I see where you're going with it, because I remember when you bought Jark, and we buy all our horses as foals, and he's the first good horse I mean, I've had many good horses. Challenger was my first good horse, actually, but he was a stallion, so he was harder. And, you know, we lived on a breeding farm, so it was harder. But I kept saying to Greg, he just does it. He just does everything. And then I teach him something and he remembers it. And like we have what we call a justice system where I have to abide by the rules and so do the horses. And Jack would always, you know, abide by the rules. And then Ren was even easier and Blue was even easier. Like the athletes got better, their minds got better.
Not military style. It's a thing of ticking boxes. You know, the horse knows how to walk properly. The horse,
That can be a bit military style though. Like we get out of bed at 4:30 every morning and the horse off bed at 6 o'clock. But would there even be horses anymore if they weren't used for our, I can't even say pleasure. For me, my horses are just part of my soul. And if I couldn't ride them for sport anymore, then I just need to be near them. I need to communicate with them. And for me, dressage is the clearest way to do that because then we're speaking the same language and I know he understands me and I know I understand him. I know dressage is about different things to different people, but would horses, other than the very few Brumbies and Mustangs, would they exist as a species if we were not using them anymore? I mean, they would, but they wouldn't be en masse like they are.
In Australia, for example, if you look back into the early 1800s, we used them a lot. We used them for moving cattle across the continent. We used them for any part of transport. So horses were very heavily used. Then over time, when the mechanics came in and cars were invented, tractors were invented, the horse slowly died off. It only came back into good faith and breeding back in Australia when people started using them for sport again. So yes, the horse did die away and was turned away, and there's lots of Brumbies and stuff, which was great for but yes, the horse could have been lost because people would have gone, never have to ride another horse again, never have to plough a paddock with a horse again, just feel it.
And look, just because we've bred them doesn't mean you can treat them however you want. And I mean, when we were growing up, if the dog got in the way, I remember that they'd just be kicked out of the way. And now nobody kicks their dog. Like I don't even smack my dogs. You can see my dogs do whatever they want. I mean, our horses are under much stricter rules, but they weigh 700 kilos. Apple weighs.
Well, hang on. When you say much stricter rules, be careful there because I've seen you with your horses. It's not so much stricter rules. There's a relevance. So this dog is tiny. What's she weigh? She's fat. So
she's not fat. She weighs 11 kilos.
There's a level of
what
you talk about obedience and say, well, move away. With a horse that's 700 kilos, you might have to go, move away. So it's not about.
Well, the only strict rule we have for the dogs is they learn out. So if they're under the horse's feet, we point our finger. And
yours are so good at doing it too.
Okay, no, well, actually, I didn't teach these next lot of dogs because our horses now we've closed the professional side of the barn down. It's all our horses, and they plant all the horses know to plant their feet, and the dogs get out of the way. Oh, poor Greg.
So when you talk about ethics,
dogs.
So rebounding, if we talk about ethics, I don't think it's about is it ethical to use your horses for doing different things. Is it ethical for a certain person to train a horse? It comes down to the ethics of the person, not of the sport or the discipline or whatever. It comes down to should that person be licensed? And we talked about this, for example, in the Arabian horse industry. We talked about licensing our handlers and trainers, which I thought was going to be a great idea. They do it a little bit overseas in different countries. Should a show jumper be licensed? For example, a racehorse trainer has to be licensed, and they are then held responsible for their actions and can be banned. Should a dressage trainer have to be licensed to be a dressage trainer?
Absolutely.
No, you don't. Anyone can become a dressage trainer without competing dressage. If you do something wrong, what happens? The EA comes in and, naughty boy, don't do it again. Or you get smashed over social media.
Oh, we are.
But there's not the repercussions. And I know when we first talked about bringing in the Arabian horse industry, the repercussions were enormous because everyone was scared because everyone said, well, if you get done at a show for doing the wrong thing, you will get banned for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, but it has to come down to you and if
the ethics of you as a trainer.
But see, I believe that animals are equal to us, and there was a time many, many years ago when people who had different skin colours were considered not equal to us. Will there come a time when animals will be considered equal to us?
People call themselves furries.
Okay, well.
Hey, so some people think we're equal.
Oh my gosh, Greg. All right, so I think
Did that close the can of worms? I think we just opened it up a bit more.
we've opened it even more. All I know is that I love my horses.
Should we have a
and they-
registration for trainers?
Yes.
So you're held responsible for reactions.
But I think mankind is starting to really stand up and say you need to be held accountable. You need to be held accountable for trashing the oceans and for taking the world's resources and not leaving enough resources. You know, like you drive half an hour and you can see just beautiful big houses being demolished because they're putting up a bigger, fancier house. Like, that's crazy. What they should use all the reuse of. Anyway, back to horses. So ethically, I don't agree that you should ban the Olympics because animals aren't treated ethically. Because I personally, as far as the trainers that I know, yes, there's been a couple that I watch and think, ugh, but they've already been picked up and pushed out of the industry anyway. I witness day in and day out at shows horses being treated incredibly beautifully and, you know, winning. My horses are winning out when they even hear my voice, and I mean, maybe they associate that with carrots. I say it's because they love me, but I guess the next big reason that they're talking about whether or not dressage belongs in the Olympics is, has dressage now become a sport only for the rich?
Yeah, but I guess again, instead of singling out dressage a little bit, we can say, well, show jumping's probably a little bit the same.
But my answer is no, it hasn't become a sport only for the rich. The greatest Olympic athletes didn't necessarily come from money. So my personal heroes, Rainer Klimka, I don't believe he came from money. Carl Hester, he did not come from money. Isabel Worth did not come from money.
Heath and Rosie.
Heath and Rosie, yeah. Heath and Rosie Ryan are my heroes as well, and they haven't come from money. So even if you change that playing field and said, okay, you know, well, for instance, we think that it would be a great idea to say at the Olympics, you can only compete at the Olympics if you've trained that horse from the beginning.
Okay, so that's I can see your perspective on that. And I look upon the money that's now being pushed into the horse industry in some angles.
I mean, it's great if you have a Grand Prix horse and you can no longer afford to compete it, and then you sell it and the money goes into the industry, that trainer has more money. However, I don't think that horse should be able to compete at the Olympics. Then owners are coming in and supporting the riders who have taken the, apple's sliding off, supporting the riders who have put the training in. I mean, look, this is a very controversial point of view, but when you say that it's a sport only for the wealthy, you look at Australians, most Australians can, you know, where it's cheaper to buy property in Australia, so a lot of Australians can go and buy a horse, which is not as possible in Europe. But it is a very, very expensive sport.
Well, and I think you can. There's levels you can come in at, isn't it? Like, I mean, we certainly do it around, you know, fairly bottom level where we've got property with a mortgage. We've invested very dearly with horses over the years and been able to, you know, pay horses off over the years.
And we will probably never compete internationally. I mean, also there's very little support for Australian riders if you do have an international horse. And I know that isn't true across all the different countries in the world. A lot of countries support their equestrian riders.
Well, I think if you look at the English system where they have their lottery system, which actually supports their teams over there, and I guess the hardest thing for Australians looking at it is how do I afford to be able to get across? I remember talking to Heath once about it. I think he got across to a World Cup.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, well, what did it cost you, Heath, to get across there and back and all that? And he said, Greg, I ended up roughly, he said, from the cost to get over there, getting back, the income I lost with lessons and clinics and sales here in Australia while I was away, he reckoned it was about $250,000.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I went,
yeah.
Oh, wow.
And no Australians that I know are going to put that much of their life into an Olympic bid.
Well, we've been involved with a few big Olympic fundraisers. We've had the phone calls to us and said, can you help?
Yeah, we'll definitely put
a couple
money
of them were a little bit controversial, I know one of them ones we had a few years back, and
no, we're not going to get into that, Greg.
We're not, but it was controversial about how the funds were spent.
Yeah. So we're going to move on from that because Greg could get really controversial. Maybe you can have your own subscribers club to get into all that stuff. But when they say that it's a sport only for the wealthy, it actually, you'd have to break it up a little bit. So, money can buy pedigree.
Mm-hmm.
Money can buy training.
Yep.
Money buys all the stuff that you don't think about: osteopath, the chiropractor, the vet, the surfaces, the fuel alone to run a property like this for the gators and the graders, and the cost of fodder is incredible. So there is an enormous amount of money that needs to go into it. So let's talk about pedigree. When you buy a horse with pedigree, why does that mean that it's wealth? Like, why does a horse with pedigree cost more than a horse without pedigree?
Well, I could go out to, they don't exist anymore, the old Camden sales or the old McGrath Hill sales and buy myself a horse out there out of, old Bill might have bred it down the road out of by his old black stallion out of the old grey mare. Is it going to be able to do dressage? Well,
is it grey though? Is it dapple grey?
It
could have been. Dapple grey, maybe I'll buy it.
Is that horse going to be able to do what you want? Well, if you're going to go out and just do weekend warriorship in dressage and just think, I'm going to just do some prep tests and prelim tests, that's all my goal is going to be. Yes, the horse can probably do it and you'll score your sort of 40s and 35% all weekend. Can I afford pedigree? Well, yes, look, I guess...
To me, other than temperament, is absolutely the number one. I need to see all the way back, mother, father, grandsire, granddam.
Well, the first auction we went to
horses.
Was the auction we actually bought Jacaranda at, and I said to Rochelle, she took me because I was the person that look at horses and tell whether it's going to be good or not. And I said, well,
it wasn't you still is the person to look at horses.
And I said, well, what do I look for in a pedigree? She said, just give me Grand Prix top and bottom. I went, okay, well, and so I'm sitting there going, and I had no idea who these horses were, so I'm like, who's this horse? Jazz, is he good? She was like, yeah, he's good. I'm like,
still good. I don't know if he's
Don
still
Ramiro,
number one.
And so we looked at those as pedigrees. So we looked through the catalogue and we went pedigree. That's great. Which then culled a certain amount of horses out. Then you start looking at the horse conformationally as to whether.
Well, you need to understand pedigrees, and you can now study them because the stud books. I don't think the Australian one does. But they'll, in their 100-day testing and stuff, they'll list down, their feet, their stable manners, and then you can look up, top sire. They'll have a percentage rate of the foals, temperaments, winnings, and that sort of stuff. So you can look up a sire and see how many, basically, of its foals have gone on to perform well, conformationally correct, temperamentally sound.
So could that be?
It's not impossible.
Looking at different types of breeds, I know over the years I've seen some breeds come through where a certain sire has been really popular and his progeny have flooded the market. So you might have had 50 of his babies out there at one time. Do you see that in dressage where you might see 50 by whatever stallion out there, and everyone thinks, oh, that horse must be the top sire because all of his progeny are winning? Does that still work, or is it possibly that there's a chance that those horses might be as well bred bottom side as well?
Well, I personally won't breed to a stallion until their offspring's 6 years old and they're starting to, because you can have, I think most of you would know, you have the sweetest 3 and 4 year olds, and then when they come 5 and 6, that's when you start to put the pressure on. And living in a professional stable for the last 40 years, that is where we've made our bread and butter with 5 and 6 year olds. Because not everybody, but a lot of people can ride the little babies, but then when the babies start to go, wait a minute, I'm going to push back a bit. So I like to see them when the horses have been performing at a top level for a little bit longer. Also, being in a professional stable, we know the bloodlines. So there'll be some bloodlines, a lot of bloodlines that I don't like, I personally don't like. And then there's a lot of bloodlines that I really love, and you tend to draw yourself toward a similar style of horse all the time. Everybody has a different style of horse that they like. I like a horse with plenty of blood, so plenty of energy, but I like a rational horse because I enjoy communicating with them. So it's really important to me that I'm able to have a horse that I can say, hey, it's okay, that bin liner isn't going to kill you. And so that's not what I've always had, and a lot of my horses have been very spooky because that was the only bloodline we could get in Australia for a little while.
So again, it comes down to pedigree.
And the more proven the pedigree, the more expensive the horse will be. So,
and it's very true, because in saying that, you know, we've certainly had some pedigrees where, because we did a lot of work over the years with bad remedial horses, and occasionally they'll give me a phone call and say, Greg, we need you to take care of this horse, and I'll say, so what do you think of this one? She goes, don't touch it, because it's a bit of a renowned one for being a hard one. So I guess over the years we've gotten these ones where, and people talk to me now and they go, well, what do you think of this line? I go, well, I've had a few of those horses that came through. They were misunderstood. They were remedial horses because they were misunderstood. They weren't actually bad horses. They were just misunderstood and hadn't had the right opportunity. I think a lot more of our new pedigrees, we're seeing a lot more professional types of horses maybe that amateurs are buying that shouldn't probably be buying them.
Well, in Australia too, we are only breeding for the top market. Whereas in Europe and America, there's a lot of horses bred for the middle market. They're beautiful, they have beautiful paces, and they have a brilliant temperament.
Why would you do that though if you're going to lower your market value? Why wouldn't you be always breeding for the top?
Well, you're not lowering the market value. So if you said to me, oh, I'd like to buy a beautiful horse for my wife, it needs to be comfortable, it needs to be quiet, it needs to be beautiful, and it needs to compete at the top level.
Oh, so you're breeding horses that sell?
Well, so there's Grand Prix horses and there's Grand Prix horses.
Yeah.
You remember when I was piaffing Jack, who our horses are our pet horses, and Jack's piaff, he couldn't be bothered. You know, he really couldn't.
It was a 12.5 all day.
Yeah, well, we love him. And then I look across and there's, you know, €1 million horse piaffing over there, and I had a little giggle to myself. So there was my nice horse, there was the most brilliant horse in the country at the time. But I just think that I don't see that a horse bred to be more rideable is worth any less than, and also that top horse, he was rideable too, but you know, my horse is worth $100,000, her horse is worth €1 million. You know, so I think that pedigree, you definitely do buy pedigree. I think that buying the training, I've already expressed that I love schoolmasters for young riders. I think that they're essential. But I do really feel that if you can go and just buy a horse and compete against somebody who's trained their horse, I don't see that as level. I don't see that is immediately, it is no longer just a sport for everybody. It changes the vibe from everybody going out and, you know, playing soccer together. And you remember the story of the guy at the Olympics, and everybody he's a shooter, and they had, you know, most of them had the expensive glass, expensive gun and everything, and he just took his out, scooted one up, got a silver medal. And he was incredible. Everybody talked about it because he said to the whole world, you don't need to be crazy rich wealthy. You've just got to be talented and work your ass off. And it was so inspiring. And I think that in the dressage community, I'm sure it's across all the sports, there is a feeling of people feeling a little deflated and saying, well, how can I compete against the person who can afford to go and buy the best horse in the world? And I can only afford the horse I can afford and work hard. You know, how can I compete against that? If you can go and buy that training, and I've got to do the 8 years, 10 years of it, how?
Well, I mean, yeah,
and that's part of the argument.
And that is very true, and we do see it a bit here in Australia. What I always find interesting though is them watching the wheels fall off after about 6 months. Is we watch the rider that's had that horse all their life, all their career, brought her up through the levels and got in the Grand Prix, and the horse trusts the rider trusts the horse horse can go out and do a really good Grand Prix test, scoring mid 60s to high 60s. We see that horse come out, you know, from Europe. They spend a lot of money on. It comes out and blows everyone apart, scores high 70s all of a sudden. But then after a while, that rider on that horse hasn't had that horse all the way through its career in life. And I start to see things fall apart. So I was watching a horse one day there at SIAC, and everyone's like, oh, look at this thing, it's worth this much, worth that much. And they're all raving about it. I went, but the girl's forgotten how to ride the hind leg. And it went out and scored very well, that horse, that competition. I can't remember what comp it was, and I can't remember what horse it was, but I do remember the horse. And
I'm not going to
say it. No, but the horse was, to me, it was an international quality horse. It was probably a medium level, you know, in the Grand Prix horses in Europe, but in Australia it was a very good Grand Prix horse. But the rider hadn't been taught how to ride the horse, so all the money in the world, and I was watching a horse out there trailing its hind leg. Unfortunately, the picture was beautiful and everyone loved it and it scored very well. But me as a trainer, for what I look for in a dressage horse, it was incorrect and it shouldn't have scored as high as it did. The horse, it should have only been in the low 60s.
That's getting into a whole other debate.
Whole new debate.
And I would really
But that's where the
like
money
to get
falls
into
apart.
that. Because one of the last shows I watched, the test that I loved, that I thought was really harmonious, scored about 10% lower than I thought it should have. And the test that I thought, what a beautiful horse, but was littered with mistakes and tension, scored a lot better, and it really blew my mind. I didn't understand that. But back to what you were saying.
That's a controversy worldwide. We hear it all the time from big comps, even in Europe.
Well, and it comes down to personal taste.
Yeah.
What I like, what that person likes. And then I discuss it with a friend of mine who's a judge, and she wholeheartedly disagreed with me. She liked the engagement of the other one and the this, and I could see her point of view. I liked the one who was maybe a little more ordinary and looked more harmonious. I felt was more correct, but that's always going to be something in dressage. But do you genuinely feel, Greg, that if a rider buys a super fancy horse that it always goes wrong? I don't think so.
It doesn't always go wrong. It comes down to the natural talent of the rider, certainly, and we've got some amazing young talent here in the country.
Can you buy that?
Talent?
Yeah.
No, it's feel. And I've even seen. Sorry, it's a mixture of talent and feel. I've seen talented riders
Can feel be
that have no
bought
feel. Feel can't be bought.
by
no.
coaching?
It can
The
be.
feel can be taught
It
to
can
a
be
degree.
taught, but then I've had some amazing students over the years, children starting out, and I go, this kid's going to be amazing. But do they have the brain to keep on going with it? So there's a lot in
Well,
there.
it takes three things to make a top rider.
Mhm.
Three. Support, parent,
Yeah.
partner. I'm sure there's people who've done it on their own, but we're talking in percentages here. Grit. There's got to be something here that makes an athlete keep going. And the third one is talent, which comes in, to me, I look at their spine, and their spine just follows the horse fairly naturally.
Yep.
It can be taught, but they're the three things that if you're missing one of them, you're going to struggle. I would add in sometimes intelligence to be able to have your toolbox and know which tool, like a doctor,
Yep.
being able to understand techniques and be able not just grasp them, but be able to know which one to go for straight away. But that's experience too. I don't know that I'm highly intelligent, but maybe I once was before I did horses for so long and had my head cracked so many times. So we've talked about pedigree. We've talked about the training. What else makes riding to be considered that they're even thinking about taking it out of the Olympic Games, which has been in the Olympics since 1912? What else are they saying why it shouldn't be part of the Olympics? So,
Well, look, a write-up I read a while ago was all about that whole financial thing. They're saying it's become a rich man's sport a little bit, and this person, I haven't read the whole article, I'm sorry, I did sort of skim over it to get some highlights of it, and they were basically saying, well, it's become a rich man's sport. It's pushed the proper athletes probably out of the corner a little bit. It's pushed them out of being prospective, as in being chosen by selectors a little bit in certain countries. We're talking worldwide here, guys. So, and so they were sort of saying, to them it wasn't
not enough that it's a tradition. That they're now saying that there's all these factors that make it that it is basically only for the wealthy.
Yeah.
So my reasons for keeping dressage in the Olympics is not just that it's a tradition, and not just that to do it you're overcoming financial odds and trying to get even in a playing field that isn't even, it's because it's incredibly hard. You're not just relying on your own grit and determination and talent as an athlete, but you're also relying on your horse. And horses can be temperamental. They're feeling. So some days they just may not feel like it. They may not like the conditions. Like in the last show we went to, our horse does not like wet conditions. They're too slow for him. He doesn't enjoy them.
Well, we've seen it at the Olympic level, haven't we, where horses wig out.
Yeah, they don't like all the big screens. They may
Imagine
not.
getting to that level and the horse wigs out.
Oh, well, it happens. So, I mean, it is very difficult. The days of dressage riders not being athletes are over. In the old days, I remember we were at a training clinic, and one of the other riders, I had her head on my lap. She had such a hangover, and I was having a cigarette. You know, and now, you know, where I do Pilates every morning, I am strong.
Did I ever hear a story one day about how,
this is a bad story.
was it in Europe, and it was when Carl was first starting out, and they say he used to run in on the days of was it the meetings or the days getting ready for Olympics, and then he'd run in he'd been out partying all night or something, and he'd run in with his shoes.
Probably, yeah, in a plastic bag, a shopping bag. His book is so good. If you haven't read Carl Hester's book, you have to read it. It is just so real and so it's so personable, isn't it? And it suddenly makes one of the world's greatest trainers so accessible, and he's one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. I only got to meet him at a demonstration, but he was kind, he made me laugh. I went to shake his hand and I was so excited and so nervous I couldn't remember which hand to put out, and he looked up at me. I was on one of my bigger horses and he said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm just shitting myself." And then I was like, "Oh my God, is that what I just said? Is that what I just said to my hero?" Anyway, I eventually figured out what hand to give him, and he made a few more jokes and taught me so much in just, he was watching for a minute, and then he said that he was checking if all the horses were sound. He was really strict. I think he got rid of 2 horses, or one in the beginning round and then another one later. But he taught me so much and really got me laughing. And anyway, I digress.
So anyway, we're talking about how nowadays, certainly the riders have to be an athlete. Well, I guess too also a little bit the riders we've all grown up with, we're all now a little bit older, so we have to take a little bit more care of what our bodies are like.
Absolutely,
Get a few mental parts in there.
You're supposed to not hinder the horse at all, and influence the horse. And to do that, you need to be completely independent. And when you're sitting on 700 kilos of horses coming this far off the ground, you know, every second they're coming up and landing and up and landing. In order not to disturb that horse at all, I mean, you've got to have buns of steel. I mean, you really have to have an amazing core, amazing abs, balance. And that's difficult also because as horses sometimes say, no, we're getting injured. So I know I've broken so many body parts. You know, I think I've broken every finger. I've broken my spine a few times, because to get in a position where you can own your own horses and own your own home and build an arena. And I had a girl say on a social media post, "Oh, well, you're so lucky you own your own arena and you can afford somebody to stand there filming you and stuff." And I thought, baby, if you knew what I had to do to earn this own arena.
That arena's worth more than our house.
Oh man, like spinal fractures and how many fractures in my jaw?
14 on the left hand side.
Oh, God knows. So
hang on, so we're saying nowadays you've got to be an athlete. How old was that Japanese guy that came in? Wasn't he a dressage driver that came in that year at the Olympics? Was he 70?
Yeah, and that is the subject of...
He was 70.
Well, and you know, that's the subject of our next podcast. Should there be an age limit to competing in dressage? Yeah, so we're going to have a good talk about that, because for me, dressage and horses are a great equalizer. You know, regardless of wealth, if you take 2 very good riders, one of them very wealthy, one of them without pot to piss in, and give them both a ride on one horse, okay? You're going to figure out fairly quickly if those riders, both of them can ride or not. So if you just take a very wealthy person and put it on my horse, and then you put Greg on my horse, I can guarantee that horse is not going to know whether or not that person has money and that person doesn't. You know, that if you take 2 world-class riders and put it on the same horse, one rider will ride the horse better because there's an energy and a vibe, and everybody's attracted to a different thing. Yeah. So I ride a certain style of horse a little better than another style of horse. I've trained myself to ride them all. You know, I ride the hot one and the recalcitrant one, and you know, I can ride all the different styles fairly well. But I really don't think that wealth cancels out whether it's an Olympic sport or not, because all the very, very top gold medalists have not come from wealth. B, horses are equalizers. They don't care if you got money or not. If you know the way in and the horses sense it and they want to work for you, that has nothing to do with wealth. All the others, the peripheral stuff does. You know, the ability to maintain your arena, the ability to buy the pedigree, sometimes the ability to buy the training. You know, and for every single child rider that I have, if they can afford to buy the training, we will buy the training so that the child is safe and so that they can learn on a horse that's going to teach them the magic of horses. If you put them on a rank horse, they're not going to have much fun.
No, that's right. That's right.
So what does it come down to for you, Greg?
Look, it is hard. And I know as a bit of a battler, trying to get horses ready for top competition, and even our top competitions here in Australia. You know, our last CDI we just took Andy and with Jack Randa, CDI J, and being a CDI horse, of course, you had to be stable there for the whole competition. That was $1,500 just for that competition.
That was crazy.
It's pretty crazy, but that's just the way. That's just how expensive it's become. You go to a normal competition anywhere, whether it be Syac, Barrel, or Stonewall. You're now paying more for a competition. You're paying for grounds. You're paying for maintenance. You're paying admin fees. You're paying this fee. This last 12 months, probably everyone's been a little bit surprised. Oh, why all of a sudden are these admin fees clocking up? Well, it's because everyone that's running these competitions.
Because everything costs something.
Well, and they're all volunteers, and there are probably a lot of those people that are doing the big organisations of some of those shows are taking time off work to actually do the volunteer work. There's probably not many people out there that are doing the running of the shows that are actually making money out of it.
Dressage isn't boring. I'm not yawning for you guys.
There's a few that are doing a really good job. I think Karen Lever's got a couple of platforms going, which thank goodness she's worked out how to probably make a little bit of money out of it, but I don't think she's making a fortune out of it. You know, Graham still does, he's still got a full-time job, so she's not making
90% of what she does would be volunteer.
A lot of it would be volunteer work. We see the big committees always struggling to get people to come and help with the comps, so nowadays we pay a volunteer fee. If we can't volunteer at a comp, we have to pay $50 as a volunteer fee.
But
I don't know where that $50
it's
goes.
expensive to live now. Everything's
live.
expensive. And I think you are defined by your choices. So we could say there's no way we can afford to compete anymore. Instead, we say, there's 3 big shows a year. So there's 3 of us. We'll have a birthday gift. So CDI is a birthday gift. The States or a Nationals is a birthday gift. And they're the sacrifices that
I don't ever understand that because I don't compete, so I never understand if I get
happy birthday, Greg, I'm going to Nationals.
Yeah, I never get that one.
Yeah, but if you choose that you want to do something, then you have to be prepared for the sacrifice that goes with it and the discipline. There is a discipline for passion. I think Lady Gaga said that, and it's true. And one of my girlfriends has the most unbelievable holidays, but she sold all her horses to do it because she wanted to sit. No.
This is another topic.
No. Well, maybe it is, but it is possible to do horses on a shoestring. We've proven it.
And I think also is...
Haven't we? I mean, we have proven it within a shadow of a doubt. Neither of us have foreign money.
Yeah, and we have a couple of top horses in the country. I'm very proud to say that. And there are 2 of them coming through to FEI now, ready for Grand Prix. But I think it's also important to remember the horse you choose to do it with, that if it's a horse you choose to be your partner in this line of whatever you're doing, working, invitation, show jumping, dressage, the horse that you choose and say, this is the horse I love, this is the horse I want to do it with, be proud of what you get out of that. Be proud to think, well, this is, I'm not going to go out and, if I happen to get up there and one day I come out against, Vallegro's in the same competition as my horse. Oh, why didn't I win? It doesn't matter. Because the horse you're on is the horse you love. And we see that a little bit with sometimes people come out and they're frustrated. They go, what's wrong? Oh, I should have done better. So, your horse did.
Were you happy with your horse?
Your horse did amazingly. Yeah. And the coaching I'm doing at the moment, I've got some young horses coming through in some of my clinics, and one I was doing the other day was a 4-year-old, and she's like, oh, I've got this. I said, hang on a sec. Didn't we do its 4-year-olds like 2 years ago? Oh no, because we've been working as a baby quietly, doing a lot of groundwork with it, and it's getting ready for its 4-year-olds. And I said, this horse is just beautiful. You love it. You've loved it since the day you bought it as a foal. This is your choice of horse. She said, yeah, that's right. I said, so you're going to be happy with what you get? She said, yeah. She said,
yes, that's what it is, right there. Where
love.
Yes, love, and don't compare yourself. Don't be doing, everybody else at 5-year-olds is doing this, or she's got so much money, so it's not fair. And no, it's about...
stop the placings. Oh, I got 2nd or 3rd. I don't care what place you got.
Sometimes we don't even look up our results. I do if I really respect the judge because I want to know their comments. But it's
you want to know your
about...
percentages, that's your score, that's your marks.
Well,
Your
sometimes I
marks.
don't want to know.
Sometimes you don't want to know. So it's all about the love of wanting to be there with your horses.
Yeah, and staying connected to your why. You know, why do you do it?
Yeah, and I guess it's a question I ask a lot of, especially nervous riders we have in our clinics nowadays. They all come in. A lot of my clinics are made up of nervous riders and wanting to return. And I say, well, why are you here? Well, you obviously want to be here, but you're upset and you're nervous. Why? And they said, oh, because I love being on my horse. I love being on my horse. I said, well, there you go.
Do you find that a lot of your riders are looking at what the other 4-year-olds are doing, what the other 5-year-olds are doing, and panicking that they've got to keep up? And you know, I find a lot of my riders are looking at the girls that are doing really well and starting to sort of hating them a little bit. And I always say to them, just because she has what you want doesn't mean that she doesn't deserve it.
Yeah.
You know, so you can find it inspiring, or you can find that it makes you jealous. There's two totally different ways of looking at it.
Oh, definitely. You can use it as a thing of going, well, I aspire to be that good one day, or I'd love to have a horse that good one day, or I'm happy that she's doing well, and I'm really happy going out and just doing what I'm doing.
Well, and that's a difficult part of the human mind, is that those negative thoughts just take a hold and start running around. For me, I catch hold of thoughts that make me feel bad, that sit in my body wrong, that hurt my tummy, or that make me feel just down and a bit more depressed.
You are human.
Sometimes. But they're the thoughts that I grab and get rid of and replace with another one. For instance, when I see one of my fellow competitors doing really well, I think fantastic, good for you, because she's doing well doesn't mean that I can't do well too.
And it is a big thing. I know when I first came into the sport, and one of the big first comps we did was up in Tamworth. It was actually it was the first dressage comp Tamworth ever held, and we were stabled up there. We had Heath and Brett and Jeremy, and
that's right, that was fun.
And it was a really big fun show. And if somebody had a bit of a muck up in a test, it was, oh mate, what are you doing? You know, a bit of a laugh about it.
Yeah, one of the first ones ALEC ever held.
Yeah, but it was quite jovial about the whole thing, and quite often...
Very jovial when I found you all passed out on the ramp of Heath.
That wasn't me, that was Heath, Brett,
no more talking, who had
I
too much to do.
I wasn't in it. Heath was very ill the next day. He had to smarten up before Rosie got there. But the thing was that everyone was having a good time, and we'd all been barned together there for a couple of days, I suppose, which probably helped. But maybe back then it was more cost effective. We went up there for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, and we'd take more horses. So now everybody's limiting
we only
horses.
took one.
Well, he was a handful. He kept us busy the whole show. He had a few mental problems, didn't he?
Yeah. But I think the thing was that everyone was there to have a good time. And I remember looking across, and Brett was warming up to do one of his tests. I don't know what he was doing. And he was out there and he's dancing through this. And I started to laugh. And she was, don't laugh, he's trying to practice. I went, oh, sorry, I thought he was a bit of a goofball. But that's how jovial it all became.
Why were you laughing at him?
Because he was sort of dancing around the aisleway of the barn, and I thought he was just having a bit of a joke.
Oh, he was practicing his freestyle.
Practicing his freestyle.
Oh.
Or a test of some sort.
Good. You do think we're weird. Like at the bottom of your soul, you actually think dressage runs are weird, don't you?
No. There's a few years that are quite normal.
He doesn't mention me, do you?
Well, I came from a background of very much horsemen, and then, I had quite a different upbringing into horse industry, running big Arabian farms and stuff. So, dressage, I love the thing of dressage now, and I love getting a young dressage horse and looking at how good it can become. I love getting a new dressage student. Actually, I've got a lesson shortly, Shell, we've got to hurry up. And moulding them to the best they can be in themselves, just in themselves. Not about that I need to go out and get 85%. I try to make them as good as they are in themselves. And as happy as they can be in themselves.
Well, and at the end of the day, it has to be about becoming the best rider that you can be. When it becomes about something else, it becomes ugly and everything's unfair and everything's difficult. And as soon as you hop on Daddy's lap, do you? As soon as it becomes about anybody else or anything else other than you and your horse finding harmony in a difficult situation with noise and mud and all the other stuff that's thrown at us as competitors, you're in for a fairly bumpy ride, and I personally wouldn't compete anymore if it wasn't so hard. If you weren't constantly putting yourself under the scrutiny of judges and other people, to be able to do that and come away heart whole, you have to go into it dead center.
I do hear a lot of you professional riders say that nowadays, that, you know, if you didn't have to go out and compete, you wouldn't do it. You'd stay at home and just train your horses at what you love doing.
Well, that's the
and
good
not worry
bit. That's
about
the luxury,
It's
is
the
home
luxury.
and riding, and you know, going to competitions is a lot like hard work, and it's expensive. But you know, like we said, we make our sacrifices to do it. But I do think that competing needs to be something for you that is personal, even when it's professional, like it is for us. You know, we don't make any money from competing. Our money is made sideways in the shop and stuff. But you know,
Well, yeah, it is very hard, I think, though, for you professionals out there. And I mean, being in the capacity I was in for 30 odd years, showing professionally, it's a mental sport too, which is something we need to touch base on in another talk about. How, I mean, a lot of times at these comps, I'm there more as a psychological support group. Andy talks about, you know, Shell's position and stuff, but I'm just there about trying to make sure she feels good about herself and good about how she feels her horse is going. So it's a lot of mental pressure, and so sometimes if somebody snaps at you in a warm up, just remember they're probably just as having as tough a time as you are sometimes, and smile and go, hey, looks good though, you're doing a really good job.
oh yeah, we just did a post about when you're warming up, the etiquette, and the only thing I didn't put in it is that a lot of people don't follow just normal etiquette rules, which are when somebody's within 5 metres of you, give them a smile. If they're within 2 metres, say good morning, hello.
You women are mad in that dressage, in that warm-up arena sometimes, aren't you? I watch you get around there, and there's a lot of Olympians out there trying to ride that Grand Prix freestyle. But you know, look, everyone's stressed about it, but just go out there and have some fun. I guess that's the big thing we're always pushing for, is go out and enjoy yourselves.
Yeah, well, when Greg says to me, go out and have some fun, I always feel like poking him in the eye. Like, it's, I mean, I don't go out there to have fun. I do go out there to connect with my horse. And sometimes it's very close to fun, but you're really working so hard that it's probably, you know, the days of having fun are at home when we're doing our cavalettis and that kind of stuff. But, I mean, we definitely fall on the side of, yes, we think that dressage should be at the Olympics, right?
Definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
And it is very hard. You need to have grit, you need to be fit, you need to have found harmony with your horse, and you need to be strong enough that the days that the horses go, yeah, not today, you're ready to start again another day. And that mental strength is built up at all the small competitions. So when you're going to those small competitions, Greg always says to me, just take care of your horse and the rest will take care of itself. You know, you're not here to win this show, this states, this nationals. You're trying to train a horse that's going to be a wonderful partner for the rest of its life. And
that brings me up to another one of those ones, prepping people ready for these big comps and teams. I think we need to
tell that
discuss.
Greg's raised a few babies, don't you?
There's a real bit of a thing about, you know, this whole backing of all the para groups now, which is great. We've got our groups out there, the different para groups, but the foresight that some of the selectors are putting into their brains about them getting to go to an Olympics a very short period of time after them riding dressage is really heart-burning, crushing for them a lot of times. So so I'd like to cross that.
Be careful what promises you make as coaches
coaches and selectors and stuff, and that was a really tough one for us to watch and get into a little bit, but we'll deal with that one another day.
I know, and I think a lot of you have asked if you can have some a little look into what's happened to us over the many years with clients and buyers, and man, they're going to make your hair stand on end. I don't know if I can actually...
Some might never be released until we actually retire from the sport.
Yeah, there's been some crazy times. They're fun, so let us know if that's the sort of stuff that
Yeah.
you know you'd like to get into. Some of the really nitty gritty. Obviously, we won't name names, but we can tell you some of the crazy rides that we've been on.
We'll just change their names slightly.
Oh yeah, we could make up some good names.
We might hold up photographs, but it mightn't be the person we're talking about. Okay, so remember that.
Yeah. So guys, just look at always when you're riding to be the best horsewoman or horseman that you can, because at the end of the day your horse is relying on you, and if you are getting on and you're surrounded by all of this, you're going to take it out on your horse. They can sense your vibe, just like your dogs. What's the matter? Just like your dogs can sense if you're upset about something. You know, Anna can hear that somebody's moving down the stable, the truck's just arrived. Like, they're incredibly intuitive animals, and you know, it's not just their hearing and their sense of smell that are just amazing, but they can tell if you're happy or upset or if you're good energy. So when you go near your horses, make sure that your headspace is right.
Yeah, and just enjoy being with them. And we quite often just spend time with our horses, not even in training, just being with them. One of our favourite, we don't do it as much nowadays, one of our favourite pastimes used to be going down when everyone had knocked off for the afternoon, the barn was full of horses munching on their dinners, and Shell and I would quite often go down with a glass of wine and sit quietly in the hallway just listening to them eat their dinners. That was our downtime before we came back up and started the office work for the night.
Yeah, that's for sure. Alright guys, well don't forget to hit subscribe. What's the matter, Anna? Don't forget to hit subscribe so that you know when we're loading our next videos, and this is going to be our meeting place to talk about really tricky, gnarly topics.